victims of war. She founded the charity Inara that works with children from conflict areas who suffered physical and mental harm. Arwa, we want to wish you well in everything you're doing going forward. Thanks for all that you have done. And to our viewers, thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. Erin Burnett out front starts right now.
Out front next, Trump fights back as the January 6th committee presents a devastating case against the former president. What more will the committee reveal? I'm going to ask the chairman, Benny Thompson. And Putin hints at expanding his war. As an out front regular becomes a wanted man in Russia, and we're going to talk to him about what landed him on Putin's enemy list. Plus, another big name joins the Saudi golf tournament game with 9-figure paychecks and the royal treatment. Is the future of pro golf really in Saudi Arabia? Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, checked out. Former President Trump lashing out and insulting his daughter Ivanka in the process after the January 6th committee laid the blame for January 6th squarely on him. The committee repeatedly playing video of Trump's closest advisors acknowledging that Trump lost the election fair and square. In fact, one of them they played was his own daughter, Ivanka Trump, who said she agreed with former Attorney General Bill Barr that the election was not stolen.
Did that affect your perspective about the election when Attorney General Barr made that statement?
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr. So I accepted what he was saying.
Trump tonight throwing Ivanka under the bus after he heard that, as he tries to save himself. He writes in part, quote, Ivanka Trump was not involved in looking at or studying election results. She had long since checked out. Nice thing to say, slamming his own daughter. And it comes as another Trump ally who tried to overturn the election behind the scenes is also lashing out tonight, trying to fight back against damning proof from the January 6th committee. This is Congressman Scott Perry. He's tweeting, the notion that I ever sought a presidential pardon for myself or other members of Congress is an absolute shameless and soulless lie. While he can say that, the committee, though, says it has the receipts and claims, in fact, Perry is not the only one who sought a pardon for his role in trying to overturn the election.
As you will see, Representative Perry contacted the White House in the weeks after January 6th to seek a presidential pardon. Multiple other Republican congressmen also sought presidential pardons for their roles in attempting to overturn the 2020 election.
Well, there are many questions for the committee when it comes to what the members plan to reveal next. Obviously, this is going to be a series of hearings over the next couple of weeks. Who in Trump's orbit was communicating with extremist groups prior to January 6th? How high up did that communication go? How will they prove, as they say, that Trump knew he lost the election, point blank knew it, even as he continued to spread and propagate lies about fraud? And to what extent did Trump himself pressure then Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the election? In a moment, I'm going to speak to the chairman of the January 6th Select Committee, Congressman Benny Thompson. First, though, I want to begin with Jessica Schneider, who is out front on Capitol Hill. And Jessica, what more are you learning about what we can expect next from the committee?
Well, Erin, we know the committee will continue to make its case on Monday at a 10 a.m. hearing. It will be the second of 7 hearings in total. And we know that we're expecting at least one witness. It will be the former Fox News political editor who was actually fired in the weeks after the election after he called the state of Arizona for Biden, pushing Biden over that 270 vote electoral vote limit. So he says he will be a witness on Monday. There will be 3 hearings next week. We're expecting the committee to focus on Trump's months-long effort to overturn the election, despite the fact that he and his fellow aides knew and were told repeatedly that Trump had lost. We're also expecting that we'll hear from some former Justice Department officials who were repeatedly pressured to call the election rigged and who stopped those false claims from going any further. And then, Erin, the committee will continue to build on their narrative of those far-right extremist groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. And the question questions about how pre-planned this was and whether Trump and his aides were linked. Because remember, Aaron, 17 members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers already have been charged by the Justice Department with seditious conspiracy. That's a charge that they tried to violently overthrow the government. It carries up to 20 years in prison. So we know that the thoughts that this was a pre-planned event are already out there. The evidence is already out there, and the committee is only expected to build on that. Aaron.
All right, thank you very much, Jessica. And I want to go now out front, as promised, to the chairman of the House January 6th Committee, Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson. And Chairman, I very much appreciate your time. Obviously, so many things to ask. I do want to start with former President Trump's response today to the video. You showed a video last night, a clip of his daughter, Ivanka, and clearly she accepted the election results. And the former president today said that Ivanka, quote, was not involved and had long since checked out. Does his response and what he's saying change anything for you?
No, it doesn't. And by the way, thank you for having me. We have proof about Ivanka's participation with her daddy on a regular basis about what was going on. On January 6th, she was there in the White House. And so what or who better could have access to what was going on than one's own daughter? And for him to somehow insinuate that his daughter had checked out is disingenuous on his part as a father. Daughters normally know what their fathers are doing, especially when there's a close relationship.
So, as you say, you've got the proof that she was involved in briefing him on those election results. I want to also ask you about something Jessica mentioned, of course, these far-right extremist groups, the extent to which this is pre-planned, which I know, Chairman Thompson, is core to the entire story that you are telling this country. Last night, you told my colleague Jake Tapper that you have witnesses that will describe conversations between members of the extremist groups. I'm talking about the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. Conversations between those groups and people in the former President Trump's orbit. What were those conversations about? Were they specific on the planning?
Well, the planning centered primarily around coming to Washington, showing their support for the president, and based on that engagement, they came. They came in large numbers. As you saw in the video presentation, not only did they set up outside of Washington, but for the most part, some of them brought weapons, some brought tear gas, bear spray, a lot of things that is not the normal things you bring to a rally or a demonstration. But they brought Kevlar vests and other things as if they were prepared for war. But more importantly, they did not even go to the rally. They went to the Capitol. And the video demonstrated all of that. But our hearing will share the other names of the other individuals who were talking to the Proud Boys. Some of the video you saw them meeting as a group with other Oath Keepers and others on the 5th. So there's a lot of sharing of information that we will provide the public with during our next 6 hearings that will even crystallize more in the minds of the public as to what the Trump administration did to create the narrative for January 6th.
So, you know, I know you're going to be revealing a lot of these names, but to understand where you're going with this, we know a top member of the Oath Keepers said in court that the leader of the Oath Keepers had tried to get in touch with Trump on January 6th. And the Oath Keepers leader, according to this testimony, spoke on the phone to an unidentified person who was close to Trump. Now, this person did not connect the leader of the Oath Keepers to the president in this conversation, as we understand it. My question for you, Chairman Thompson, is how close was this person to Trump? And, was this a core inner circle person having a conversation with a leader of the Oath Keepers?
Well, just let me say that in our investigation, we found close relationship with those extremist elements in the country, especially the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. I don't want to give up all of what we have. You just have to follow us during the hearing.
Yes.
But everything we present, we will be able to verify. If there's anyone who disagrees with what we present, all they have to do is come before the committee, take it, we'll swear them, put them under oath, and they can talk. That's from the president on down. So we welcome anyone who disagrees with any evidence we present in our findings to just come to the committee, and we will gladly entertain them.
So, Chairman, I guess at the core of this, and there's so many levels. Obviously, if the president had not questioned the election, said it was rigged and fraudulent, none of these people would have ever been there to begin with, right? So, if you look at responsibility in a very simple way, you've long ago established, one did not even need a committee to establish that level of responsibility. But when it comes to these specific conversations, are you going to be presenting the president of the United States himself, President Trump at that time, having any specific conversations with any of these individuals?
Well, not the president, as far as we've been able to find, but there are people, as I said, in his orbit that have engaged these groups all along. So we will be able to present certain information around that. But as to whether or not he was briefed on what they were doing, we won't go that far. But it's inconceivable that you would invite people to Washington on January 6th and tell them it will be wild. As you heard in the video presentation, that was kind of a call to arms for a lot of the radical right-wing element in this country. And so the president is notorious for sending certain messages. And it was clear in that "gonna be wild" tweet exactly what he shared with the entire public. So our job over the next 6 hearings is to tell this story. We will grow the picture of him being told by responsible individuals that the election was not stolen. They had not found any impropriety at all in terms of the conduct. In most of the areas, most of the officials were Republican. And still, he refused to accept his data person, his campaign manager, his chief law enforcement official, because he kept pushing this false narrative on the public. He spent money pushing this false narrative. He raised money to push this false narrative. And what we'll show in one of our hearings as to how much money he really raised, but how little he really spent.
That he did not put his money where his mouth is, as you're saying. I almost hesitate to ask this question to you, Chairman, because obviously the facts show that what he said happened with the election didn't happen, and he was told it repeatedly by everyone around him. So any stable, sane individual, should be able to look at the sky and say, okay, I know I've been saying it's green, but I get the joke. I know it's not green. But I have to ask you, do you have the proof that he did know that this was all a lie? That he knew it was all BS, even as he spread it?
Well, the only thing we have is the firsthand testimony of different witnesses from, as I said, his own attorney general, the election officials who he hired to run his campaign. Those are his trusted advisors. And if these are the people you hire to advise you, and they give you their professional advice that you've lost the election, why would you go to that rump group of Giuliani, Powell, and others who really are just along for the ride and start following them rather than the people you've been working with all along? And so even when you started going to court, you went to court over 60 times and you lost. And so at some point in America, when you lose an election, and I tried to show that in the time of the Civil War, President Lincoln was faced with a similar situation, and he rallied the country rather than divide the country and said, if I lose, we will cooperate with the winner. Donald Trump is the only president in the history of the United States not to cooperate in the peaceful transition of power.
Chairman Thompson, I very much appreciate your time. Thank you. I know we will all be watching again for the second hearing, which is, of course, on Monday morning. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
And next, the Dow plunging nearly 900 points. Inflation in the United States hits a 40-year high. And, in many crucial categories, it's just never been this high. Tonight, President Biden is pointing fingers.
Putin's price hike is hitting America hard.
How much, though, is Putin responsible for the price surge Americans are experiencing? Plus, outrage growing as Pete Arredondo, the Uvalde Schools police chief, who authorities said was in command, now claims, well, he never considered himself in charge. The reporter who interviewed Arredondo is out front. And Putin's alarming new claim shows his endgame does go well beyond Ukraine.
All right, you guys ready?
Alex Jones.
Those thought patterns, the three percenters, QAnon group, or the anti-vaxxers, they all originate from Alex.
How much damage can one man do to school shooting victims?
Alex Jones lied about Sandy Hook.
And the country.
The people who listen to him believe the things that he says.
CNN asks those who know him.
He's not like you or me.
Truth doesn't really matter at all.
CNN Special Report, Megaphone for Conspiracy. Alex Jones, Monday on CNN.
5 years ago, and we decided that we wanted to have a Freshman Academy community service project, and we decided part of that was going to be working with spreading awareness of modern day slavery.
At the end of your presentation, you need to tell me how that issue connects to your poem.
There's probably 300, 400 kids in the Freshman Academy. We had all of their core teachers make sure on My Freedom Day that they were teaching about that topic. And now we've got not just our core classes doing it, but also our elective classes.
Okay guys, so this is what we're going to do today as far as packing. You are going to grab a Ziploc bag, and then you are going to start here.
So when we first started this was exclusively for the freshman class, but it was such a hit with all of the classes that every year we've grown and added the classes in, so now it's a school-wide event.
And who are you helping?
So we have two groups, and both of those organizations work towards ending human trafficking or helping those that are in need. It's been amazing because our students have really embraced the idea of learning about modern slavery and embraced the idea of what is human trafficking, how it has impacted them, and it's been a very popular topic to learn about and to participate in.
We're here now at the home of one of the FSB team, and my name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
It's just been a chaotic scene here.
People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
We were just in the hospital. It was shocking. Why do you think India has been hit so badly? Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
Why does a small group of women asking for their right to be educated threaten you so much?
Raise your hand if you love school.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you. You can hear gunshots every couple minutes. Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their story.
New tonight, the Dow plunging 880 points on the news that inflation hit a 40-year high in the U.S., an 8.6% increase in May. That is even worse than economists expected. And by the way, they didn't think it was going to be good. According to Moody's Analytics, the average household is paying $460 per month more for the same goods and services compared to a year ago. Okay, that's just not money that exists for so many people. Groceries are up nearly 12%. That's the highest increase since 1979. Airfare, 38%, biggest hike since 1980. Bodywork for cars up nearly 14%, a 41-year high. Rent, biggest increase since 1987. Fuel oil, more than doubling. That is the biggest increase ever. President Biden telling Americans that Putin's invasion of Ukraine is to blame and that he is committed to bringing prices down.
Make no mistake about it. I understand inflation is a real challenge to American families. Today's inflation report confirmed what Americans already know. Putin's price hike is hitting America hard.
Out front now, economic analyst Jim Bianco. Now, Jim, look, we're talking about price increases that have not been seen in a generation, right? And if anyone has any recollection of a lot of those dates I was mentioning, that was some of the worst inflation this country's ever seen, right? In the end of the 1970s, beginning of the 1980s, right? I mean, you had mortgage rates at that point surging double digits, well above, right? Because of the horrific inflation that was seen. And a lot of these prices we're seeing now are at a higher increase than they were even then. So just how bad is it right now?
Oh, it's bad because let's remember what inflation is. It is a loss of purchasing power that affects every single person in the country. It affects Elon Musk. It affects SpaceX. It affects Tesla. It affects people that are on public assistance. It affects everybody in between. That's the thing about inflation. Unemployment affects a couple of percent of the population, and it's very unfortunate when they lose their job, but it doesn't affect everybody. So when you think about it in those terms, this is why the inflation rate is such a big deal. And I might add, why you saw another statistic also out today. The University of Michigan has been doing a consumer confidence survey since 1952.
Yep.
And its worst reading ever was June this year, this month. It wasn't 1980. It wasn't the stock market crash. It wasn't the tech bubble, or it wasn't the financial crisis or 9/11 or the COVID shutdowns. The worst reading in 70 years in the consumer confidence is right now, because of this fear of inflation.
Now, look, what we've seen in terms of energy prices, that obviously is related to Ukraine, and that's hurt, okay? But this didn't start with Ukraine, okay? It started well before Ukraine. There's a lot of other reasons for this. President Biden has been calling this the Putin price hike. He did it today. He's done it other times. Here he is.
Let me start with the Putin price hike. This is a Putin price hike. I'm doing everything in my power to blunt Putin's price hike.
Politically, I get why he says that. Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that. How much does Putin's invasion of Ukraine have to do with the inflation crisis we're seeing in the U.S., Jim?
It has a small impact. It's not zero. The price of crude oil is a big component of why gas prices are going up.
Right.
But gasoline prices at an all-time high are not consistent with an all-time high in crude oil prices. Part of that is because refining capacity is down in the country over the last couple of years. First because of COVID, then because of a lot of green rules as well. Also, if we're talking about inflation, there's a lot more going on than just oil prices when it comes to inflation. You mentioned some of the statistics earlier about getting your car repaired, or airline tickets. Those are not direct oil inputs like crude oil prices would be. So when you add it up, the Putin price hike is a factor, but it's not a dominant factor in what's going on with inflation.
Which I think is really significant when you say it is a factor, but not even the dominant factor. It's important for people to understand. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you.
And next, the Uvalde school police chief defending his actions, even as he waited more than an hour to enter the classrooms where 19 students and 2 teachers were killed. The reporter who spoke to him in his first official interview is out front. And wanted by Putin, a journalist now the target of the Russian government, all because of his excellent reporting on Putin's secret services. That journalist is a regular on this program, and he'll be out front tonight.
Africa Avant-Garde in association with Access Bank. More than banking.
We need to start developing more writers. As a producer, I'm always on the lookout for new voices, new writers, because those are the foundations of good storytelling.
The best advice I've ever received is to never stop writing, because once you start practicing the thing that you want to get good at, you start having all those inflicting thoughts of, am I good enough?
To find your voice as a filmmaker or to tell stories that have deep impact, they have to be stories that affect you yourself. If it doesn't affect you, you can't translate that into a story. Whatever you write will be superficial. So first, if you're going to tell a story that is honest, it has to be honest to you first.
June 20th, a CNN concert event. Let's celebrate, educate, and lift every voice. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. Live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
I'm Mindy Kincaid in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
Flytrex works with drones, which are basically robots. You don't have to pay salaries to robots. And that way we can take the cost, make it an order of magnitude more affordable than using humans for deliveries, especially in the suburbs where the population density is too low to optimize for multiple deliveries in the same run. We can basically offer a free delivery to our customers and charge a very small amount from the different restaurant chains and retailers. So it's basically a win-win situation for everybody, getting you your meal hotter, faster, and in a more affordable way. And we're already servicing almost 10,000 families in North Carolina, making deliveries 7 days a week, every day, to people's backyards during lunch, dinner. We send Tylenol in the afternoons, diapers in the evening, just servicing whatever people need in their homes.
I'm Hadass Gold in Jerusalem, and this is CNN.
Tonight, new details about the Uvalde school massacre, leading to even more questions and outrage about why police waited more than an hour to enter the classrooms and engage the shooter, who killed 19 students and 2 teachers. Peter Arredondo, Uvalde's school's police chief, who Texas officials say was in command, now claims in his first official interview that he didn't know that. He didn't even consider himself to be the incident commander. He tells the Texas Tribune, quote, "I didn't issue any orders. I called for assistance and asked for an extraction tool to open the door." Out front now, Zach Despart. He's a reporter for the Texas Tribune who interviewed Chief Arredondo. And Zach, this is obviously such an important interview that you got because he is at the center of finding out what happened and, frankly, what didn't happen in this horrific incident. 2 weeks have passed since Texas officials first identified Chief Arredondo as the incident commander, and it is only speaking to you publicly for the first time that he's disputing he was in charge. How does he explain that?
Good evening, Aaron. That was one of the major reasons why Chief Arredondo wanted to speak with me and my colleague James Barragan, was to dispute the fact that state officials had labeled him the incident commander, the man in charge of the shooting response. He said that simply was not true. He said he was one of the first officers to respond to Robb Elementary when the call of the shooting came in. He entered the building with another officer. They were the first ones to reach where the shooter was. By that time, he had barricaded himself inside those two adjoining classrooms. At that point, Chief Arredondo realized that they didn't have a key to enter the classroom, so he was going to stay right there, right at the front line, so to speak, ready to use his pistol if necessary to keep that shooter contained. But he was not going to retreat and form a command role. He was going to stay right there. And he said he never considered himself in charge of the scene, and he never gave any orders to anyone throughout it.
So there have been questions for weeks about whether he knew there were children still alive in that classroom calling 911. There were children alive. They were calling 911, and police nonetheless still waited outside the door for more than an hour. Now he's telling you he didn't have his radios, that he had intentionally left them behind as he left the school. So let's just start with that issue. How does he explain to you why he would intentionally leave his radios behind when he went into school?
Chief Arredondo told us he wanted to be able to confront the shooter as quickly as possible, and he left his radios behind because he wanted to have both of his hands free to use his pistol to shoot that gunman if that's what it came to. The police experts that we talked to said they just could not comprehend why an officer would leave his radio behind. That is the primary tool that police use to communicate during an emergency. Chief Arredondo had said to us that most mass shootings end very quickly, and he didn't want to waste any time. And while that is true, this incident, as your viewers know, lasted more than an hour. So the consequence of him not bringing his radio means during that whole event, he was unable to communicate with the other officers on scene.
Of course, then what you're saying in terms of his answer also raises the other kind of glaring point here, right? Which is that if he did that, even though it doesn't make sense, if he did it because he wanted to get in as quickly as possible to apprehend the shooter, he didn't do that. He stood outside for an hour. There were people alive at the beginning of that hour who weren't alive at the end of that hour. What is his answer to that most crucial question of all, which is why he and the other officers didn't go in?
I agree that is the crucial question, Aaron. He had said that once he and the other officers realized that the shooter was inside those adjoining classrooms and that those doors were locked, and they also had no quick access to any keys to open them, he decided the safest and most responsible thing to do was to wait until they had secured a key to open that door. Now, this is one of the things that the police experts we spoke to were the most critical of, because this campus police, the idea that they would not have a key to open any door on any of the schools that are within their primary jurisdiction really struck them as incredibly poor planning. And of course, Chief Arredondo wanted to push back on the narrative that during that hour-long or so period during which they could not enter the classroom through the doors, that officers outside simply did nothing. He said, no, that is not true. Yes, it was a long delay, but we did the best that we could with that time. He said that he helped coordinate the evacuation of other classrooms where officers could get in, and he credited that decision with protecting the lives of about 500 people.
All right, Zach, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you giving us all the details. Obviously, it is very important to hear what he's saying so that we understand as we try to construct, how this happened. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Aaron.
And next, an ominous new warning from Putin that this war will not end with Ukraine. And another big name joins the Saudi golf tournament as the PGA Tour retaliates tonight.
Heard it all before? But have you heard it like this?
The ultimate disruptor looks set to shake up our world. We really can't ignore the impact that this has. What can we do that explores a fresh angle? So let's untangle the players and political forces. The truth is a lot more complex. What's really going on?
Fast-paced news, in-depth reports, and fact checks from the perspective of The Global Brief with Bianca Nobilo. Weeknights on CNN.
I'm Bill Weir in Greenland, and this is CNN.
Tonight, Vladimir Putin giving the clearest signal yet that his endgame is a full restoration of the Russian Empire. In a speech to young Russians, Putin justifying his invasion of Ukraine by comparing himself to a time of Russian Empire. We use that word specifically, comparing himself to the 7th century Russian ruler Peter the Great. Putin saying he's only taking back territory that rightfully belongs to Russia, much like Peter the Great did after a brutal and horrifying 21-year war with Sweden. Read Peter Massey's book. Putin also said, quote, "It's impossible to build a fence around a country like Russia, and we ourselves aren't planning to build such a fence around us." Matthew Chance is out front on the ground in Kyiv. And Matthew, as the devastation and carnage in Ukraine continues to grow, Putin's words suggest that he has no end in sight.
Yeah, I mean, it was very symbolic potentially and telling that Vladimir Putin chose this moment to compare himself to Peter the Great. He was actually, in fairness, at an exhibition about Peter the Great, which is the context to these remarks. And so he was drawing parallels with the situation back in the 17th century to the situation now. He said, look, back then, when Peter the Great invaded Western countries or Western territory, it was said then that it was not really Russian, but in fact, in the past it was, and Russia was just taking it back. In some ways, he said that's what we're doing now with Crimea and with Ukraine as well. And so it's led to all sorts of concerns that what Vladimir Putin is really engaged in right now isn't the denazification of Ukraine. He's not concerned about Western military expansion. What he's really embarked on is an imperial adventure to regain and regather Russian lands that in the past were dominated by Moscow, whether it's in the Soviet period or in the imperial period. And so it's fueled concerns that that adventure may not stop in Ukraine, but could expand elsewhere as well, Erin.
Yeah. All right, Matthew Chance, thank you very much. And that brings me to a man now wanted for telling the truth. Russian investigative journalist and intelligence expert Andrei Soldatov is now the target of a criminal probe by the Kremlin for his reporting on the inner workings of Russian intelligence and Putin's war in Ukraine. Russia calling his reporting, much of which you have seen here if you watch the show, he's been on the program sharing it, they call it deliberately false. His bank accounts are now frozen, and he could face years in prison if convicted. So Andrei Soldatov is back with me. And Andrei, obviously, deeply unfortunate circumstances to have this conversation with you. How did you find out that you're on Russia's wanted list?
Well, hello. I got several strange messages from my bank in Moscow telling me that all of a sudden I owe something like $80,000 and 75,000 euros. And I couldn't understand that until I got another message from another bank with the information that now I face a criminal investigation with the number of the case. And then it took some hours to work out and to understand that actually I am investigated by the Russian Investigative Committee, and I'm accused of spreading fake news about the war.
And so, you shared with us the documents that Russia's investigative committee presented to the court, right? So you did share them with us. We've looked through them. They lay out their charges against you. They're punishable, Andrei, but up to by going to prison. And when Putin has wanted to silence his dissenters, he has found a way to do so. All right, I understand you're not in Moscow right now, but are you worried that your freedom or frankly, Andrei, your life is now in danger?
Well, I understand that I cannot travel to certain countries which are on friendly terms with Vladimir Putin. That is absolutely clear. Also, I understand that my family back in Moscow is a potential target, and we already see some moves in this direction. And obviously, the idea of the FSB, because it is the FSB which is behind this investigation, is to stop me from reporting. That I understand. But because I've been doing this for 22 years, and the very first time I was investigated by the FSB was exactly 20 years ago. So I understand what is going on.
Andrei, the reason that they're targeting you and going after you right now is because of your reporting. You've done some incredible reporting on the FSB, on what's been going on in this war specifically, right? On Putin, on his strategy, on what's going on in his inner circle, on the FSB members and whether they had been detained, house arrest, all of this. And now I know you have learning more about tactics, new tactics that the FSB is using. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, what we see now is that the Kremlin and the FSB is moving against people who already left the country. I'm not the only journalist targeted now by the Russian authorities, and all of us are now abroad. So the obvious objective of the Russian authorities is to find a way how to get us back or to silence us. And we already know that at least several families of people who left were visited by the FSB and kindly ask to contact with people who left and ask them to get back.
Wow. All right. Well, Andre, I appreciate your taking the time to talk to us. We'll talk to you again soon. And again, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Money Talks, another top U.S. golfer leaving the PGA Tour to join the controversial Saudi-funded league, where some golfers have been reportedly offered 9 figures to work less. And Texas authorities still reeling from their response to Uvalde, now facing questions about why some people weren't notified that a convicted murderer was on the loose.
We share this place, we all belong.
The world's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace, Africa, Asia, Europe, and Middle East. With CNNBusiness.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business.
Culinary journeys. Meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine and in an industry where men dominate. See how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
Tonight, senior U.S. officials have told Saudi Arabia that the U.S. is ready to move forward with a, quote, reset of the relationship, effectively moving on from the Saudi government's murder and dismemberment of journalist Jamal Khashoggi with the bone saw. The decision is a dramatic reversal from the tough talk of candidate Joe Biden, who promised to isolate the Saudis if he became president.
Khashoggi was in fact murdered and dismembered, and I believe in the order of the Crown Prince. And I would make it very clear, we were not going to in fact sell more weapons to them. We were going to in fact make them pay the price and make them in fact the pariah that they are. There's very little social redeeming value in the present government in Saudi Arabia. They have to be held accountable.
Well, that's not happening. And in fact, they're now burnishing their reputation. The Saudi regime is trying to bolster its global reputation by funding the new Live Golf Series that's shaking the foundations of the sport. Major champion Bryson DeChambeau defecting from the PGA Tour, joining other top golfers. They're all now going to play in the Saudi-funded league. They're getting paid a lot of money to do so, a lot of money. Some of them reportedly getting 9 figures to jump ship. And, money talks. Out front now, Bob Harig, golf writer for Sports Illustrated. If you've been watching this week, you saw him earlier. He's covering the inaugural Live Golf Series tournament, so he's in London again for us tonight. Bob, I appreciate your time. So the PGA Tour comes out today, indefinitely suspending every player who has joined the Saudi League, essentially slamming them for selling out. Now Live is fighting back, saying maybe that, they're not saying this, but there's expectation that they could help the players with their legal fees if they sue the PGA Tour. How nasty could this get?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to calm down anytime soon. Bryson DeChambeau is a big name in golf. I mean, some of the other players, including Phil Mickelson, they've had long careers, and moving on to something like this maybe makes a little bit more sense for them. But DeChambeau, just won the U.S. Open in 2020, very popular and polarizing player. And for him to make this leap is pretty significant. And, as you noted, the Live people, Greg Norman, who's the CEO and commissioner, has pledged to support the players if they felt a need to push back legally. There is some question as to whether or not independent contractors can be prohibited from doing things, in this case, golf, outside of the PGA Tour. And, the tour would be doing this no matter who is funding it. This is a threat to them. But obviously the Saudi involvement just heightens the entire scenario.
So all that money, that Saudi money that's being thrown around here, is being on display at the golf course, and you've been there. So you tweeted a photo of London black cabs that were all lined up to take the players to the course, because they're using the traditional formal black cabs. Planes flying overhead as the players were getting to tee off. People dressed as Buckingham Palace guards on the tee box. I mean, the Saudis went all out to turn this into, big pomp and circumstance event. So what is the mood like on the ground there?
Yeah, they've got a lot of bells and whistles, and obviously they have the funds to be able to do such things, to try to make it more special. I mean, PGA Tour events do a lot of nice things too, but this is a little bit beyond. I mean, to have 18 or so of the London taxis shuttling players out to their holes. Of course, most golf tournaments at the professional level do not have shotgun starts. Most of us who would play in a shotgun event are taking a golf cart out there, not a cab. It's all just a matter of, being different, trying to show that they're different. And then once they got started, though, it was golf. It looked like a golf tournament. It felt like a golf tournament.
Do you get the feeling that it's just going to be accepted, that once that people are going to, more and more are going to join once the first guys take the heat for, supporting a regime like this, that this will just take off?
Yeah, I think it's quite possible that you're going to see more guys go. I mean, this has been out there now for a while. More than a year, actually. And when it started to take shape last fall, the Live Golf people thought they had a lot of people on board. And yet there was some hiccups along the way, and they had to reset. And Dustin Johnson took the leap, and so did Phil Mickelson. And now I think that's made it easier for some other guys.
When you use the word reset, of course, the U.S. government's saying the same thing. So, it's just Proof that politics can really matter, I guess, on some level, right? When a government sort of seems to look the other way, then a lot of others can too. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And next, a Texas man and his 4 grandchildren traveling to their weekend ranch. Then they're killed by a convicted murderer. Now, Texas authorities are facing questions about their response.
This is the screen where it happens. The moments that can change the world.
These are the faces we see, the voices we empower. This is the work that continues, who we are today and what